Welcome to the Wednesday Match Play, your weekly connection to the biggest and best brands in golf. On this show you will learn more about the latest golf fashion trends, hear from LPGA and PGA Tour players, get advice on planning your next golf getaway, and much more. Broadcasting live from Palm Desert, California, now on the tee, Ricky Potts.
For more than 4 decades, Heritage Creations has helped the nation's most distinguished clubs honor their legacy and elevate the member experience. Heritage creates innovative awards for signature events and custom pieces that reflect each club's unique identity. From complete clubhouse transformations to experiential environments and Heritage interactive touchscreens, every solution is designed to inspire, engage, and endure. Heritage Creations is a proud sponsor of the PGA of America and the California and Florida chapters of CMAA.
GPS Business Insider is a digital business news publication focused exclusively on the Greater Palm Springs and Coachella Valley region. It covers local businesses, economic development, commercial real estate, tourism, government, nonprofits, healthcare, and public policy. On this episode of the Wednesday Match Play podcast, powered by Heritage Creations USA, Bob reflects on his time in the Coachella Valley, discusses his work with golf legend Billy Casper, and explains how the idea for GPS Business Insider came to life. He shares why he chose to focus on the Greater Palm Springs area, where his content comes from, and how he decides what's newsworthy enough to cover. Bob also talks about his sponsors, offers a look at his weekly insider newsletter, and introduces his advisory board. This was a fun conversation with someone who was passionate about our local community, and it was an honor to have Bob on the show. Let's tee off. Okay, so I'm pretty excited for this conversation for a lot of reasons. One, just met this guy a couple of weeks ago. Actually, haven't met him in person yet. I had to ask for his photo for this podcast, so I at least know what he looks like. But we talked on the phone a little bit. We talked via email, and I am just so pumped to dive in here. We live in the same town. We might even be neighbors. That's how close we are. But Bob, welcome to the Wednesday Match Play podcast, powered by Heritage Creations USA.
Thank you, Ricky. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to have a nice conversation with you.
Well, I tell you, I'm just so pumped to dive in. We got a lot of different things that we're going to talk about here, but just start by giving me an overview. Give me the 10,000-foot view of who you are, what brought you to the Coachella Valley, and what GPS Business Insider is all about.
Okay, so I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, went to University of Delaware, and then I was working for a major national law firm out of their Princeton, New Jersey office. I was doing presentations for non-competing firms that were in CPA, financial services, law firms, and someone in Palm Springs saw one of my presentations. They called me like at the beginning of the blizzard of the century in March of 1993, when I was sitting there thinking, oh gosh, my car can't make it through any of this snow. And then, I got to get out of here early. And the blizzard did happen, by the way. It was 4 feet of snow covering everything minimum. And it was shocking. It was terrible. But meanwhile, this call from Palm Springs, California came in. And so an hour later, I had a signed agreement to come out and do what was called what I called a marketing audit of a major CPA firm, the biggest one by far here. Came out. I think it went great. The last day was a Saturday, and two of the partners and I went and played. And so I was crushed when one of the partners said, "Bob, I couldn't pull it off to get us out on the stadium course at PGA West." And I was like, "Oh gosh, that's painful." And then he said, "But have you heard of Bighorn?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have. I've seen the Skins game on TV there." So we go out. And I was like a child, I got these, those old school, remember those Canon, those Kodak cameras where they were all made out of plastic and paper, and you like zip, 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 and you click, zip, 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 click. I was taking a photo of every saguaro, every jackrabbit, every big rock out at Bighorn in the houses, and they were laughing at me. But meanwhile, I shot a 68 that day. And so we had like this great rapport going. At the end, taking off our hats, shaking hands. And I said, "Guys, I think I really know pretty precisely what you need," which was the purpose of the marketing audit. And I'll have my report to you, within like 10 days. But feel free to call me anytime in between if you have new ideas and whatever. And they said, "How about this? yeah, we want the report, but why don't you just come work for us? We've been talking about it. And I'm standing there on 18 at the original Bighorn, the I guess it's a mountain course or whatever they call it now. And I'm looking around and I'm like, let me think about it. Yes. I was 27 at the time, and so that one thing led to another. 6 months out later, I moved from Princeton to Palm Springs. And so I've been here for 32 years and just fell in love with the valley. The first reason really was the beauty, like everyone feel the same thing. When I came in for the consulting engagement, I remember walking through Palm Springs Airport and seeing the mountains and freaking out about how amazing they are. And then, I'm like, well, there are a lot of golf courses around here too. And I was a golf nut, couldn't get enough. One of those guys who's timing his walk out the door of my early career jobs, right at 5:30, so I could, zip over to jump on and try to play 9 holes or chip and putt or whatever. So all of a sudden, I'm offered a job in like a golf mecca, and so I came out here.
Okay, so that's a lot, an awesome story. So you've had the chance to play the stadium course, I assume, since you've been here for a few years, right? You did get out there and play the stadium course at PGA West.
Well, a lot of times, especially since I was the CEO of the Humana Challenge, which was played on the stadium course, quite familiar. And so I always have relished that fact that I went from a guy that came out here to do a consulting gig for a CPA firm, and then all of a sudden, 20 years later, I was the CEO of the PJ Tour event at PJ West, which I just revered. I was all about the Western home of golf in America, tagline and everything. And so, yeah, it's kind of a full circle thing. And what's even crazy about it, I think, to me, is that my father was built a business across the United States. The family did, and he eventually had partners in Los Angeles from Wilmington, Delaware, and these partners had homes in where? Indian Wells. And so my dad was a great amateur golfer, and we played a lot of golf together over the years when I was growing up. And so he played in the Bob Hope Classic Pro-Am a number of times. And so for that to have happened, and like the years that he wasn't playing, my mom would come around and say, "Would you can't get off of that TV. It's dinner time or it's lunchtime or whatever." And we're like, "No, no, no, we're watching the Hope." And we loved it that much in Wilmington, Delaware. It's like shovel the snow off the driveway, come in and watch the Hope for 3 straight hours. And then meanwhile, or not meanwhile, but then eventually I'm running the tournament. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. That was cool.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about that, and then I knew that you had played there, but I just didn't know that it was as many times as that. But I think maybe it would be what when this episode wraps up, I'm going to talk about us teeing it up. So maybe that would. I mean, Bighorn's pretty good too, though. So I don't know. We'll talk about that later. But
Okay.
you've led organizations in media and healthcare and telecommunications and sports and consulting. I mean, you've worn a lot of hats. What leadership lesson has remained consistent throughout your career?
I think let me sift it down to my philosophy on it is generally like we and us instead of you and me. It's kind of like in any kind of relationship. If you're in a position where you disagree on something or you have to motivate people or you really need to get the team going, use we and us. We have a challenge. We have a problem. We have an opportunity, and it's up to us to jump on it, to take the next step, to create a strategy, to fight against the challenge. And so I think if you can, speak in those terms and think like that, always, looking out for the other person's point of view. I think empathy is a big deal for, managing people. And so, without getting into all those disciplines, I think those are the things that I really cared about the most. And then I think it's being able to communicate and together, really have an established vision for the organization rather than just, some lines in a strategic plan, but that everyone knows what it is. And so like the first day when I started with the golf tournament, I said, I was introduced to the group and I said, the first thing I said was, look, we have something that I want everyone to remember. We have an incredible situation with this organization, and that is It's Desert Classic Charities. And everybody here, from the accountant to the operations people, to the person that works in the warehouse, to the secretaries, to me, we should all have a chip on our shoulders on the way to work and home every day. And what's that? We get to help other people in our community because of what we do. We yield $1 million to local charities, and most of them are helping senior citizens and children. And so I want you to carry that on your shoulder every day. And it's not an arrogance thing, it's a mission. It's like we get to help other people. And that's why I want everyone to be motivated. And it's we and it's us doing it. It's not I, it's not me, and it's not you, it's us.
Well, that's awesome. That made me think of a story. I don't know where it was or what it was, but there was a gentleman that was mopping the floors after a team had won the Super Bowl and made a comment in passing about how we won the Super Bowl. And even that person that had nothing to do with the game was a part of the we. And I love that. And I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna take that to work tomorrow morning. I can assure you that it's not about me. It's not about I. It's about us.
Cool.
Well, after more than 30 years here in the Coachella Valley, what accomplishment are you most proud of? I mean, we're gonna go over so much today, but is there anything that just excites you about the region's future? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the news right now, even about talking about data centers and AI, and can we just get a train that goes from the Coachella Valley to Los Angeles and or San Diego?
Well, that's a lot. There are a lot of things in there. First thing is I think my best accomplishment ties back into a little bit of what I just said is that I've had, different positions in the valley. And, when I was the CEO of Desert Healthcare District, we gave away $5 million a year to nonprofit organizations that were helping people with healthcare, helping organizations that help people with healthcare access and specific healthcare services and things related to wellness and well-being. When I was at Verizon, before that, I was the regional representative in Southern California for the Verizon Foundation, again, giving away money. I was on the United Way Budget and Allocations Committee, giving away money. And then, then at the golf tournament, we gave away $1 million a year. And so just like this thread that goes through my career, and that's really what I'm proud of, is that I really worked hard to study the organizations, to go meet the people, to walk the halls of Martha's Village, to stand inside Find Food Bank, to see what was going on at the Boys and Girls Clubs, and to see the impacts, and then try to make decisions with my groups of people together on rewarding great management and helping the community. And so I feel like with those positions and the ability to give that money away, I took it extremely seriously at every step of the way. And I worked hard to make sure that every dollar was spent at least the best that I thought it could be. And so I think that's really a thread that's probably my best accomplishment overall, is helping others through the organizations that I did. I mean, it wasn't my money, but I think that I was a good steward of the money of the people I worked for and helped the community as a result.
Well,
What else was it? Oh, so what else did you say? Oh, so I'll tell you what excites me about the future of the region is kind of the way I am as a person. I just like to I like doing a lot of different things. I like variety. I like change. I like anticipating it and then seeing it happen. So I couldn't live in what do we call like Columbus, Ohio. You know what I mean? Because it's the same. It will always be pretty much the same as it is now. But being in the valley, to see all of this change that we've had since I've been here, and then I still think it's going to continue, right? Because we have the land. When we used to talk about economic development, I was involved in an organization that became an economic development entity in the region, and we used to talk about like what are the strengths and weaknesses. We talked about everything, and we had strategic plans, and we pushed to help diversify the economy. But in large part, we used to say, this is where the dirt is in Southern California. And I would go around town trying to raise money for the organization. And so I had lines like I would be talking to leaders in the community who had resources and could help us by, writing checks and sponsoring. I would say, look, if you're in LA, in the big cities, if you're in Orange County, you have to tear something down before you build something for the most part. Here, we had like an open canvas. And so it's less now than it was even 10 years ago, but we still have a lot of land all zoned right now for a wide range of things, commercial real estate, residential, retail and things that and then industrial where we can grow the economy. So that excites me that we can continue to grow and evolve and change accordingly in this region that I've already been in for 32 years. So that's something that's really exciting. And I do think that we still do have opportunities to diversify the economy. And so it excites me to see so many of our young people that are supported by organizations like what's called One Future, where they have incredible amounts of scholarship dollars and a tough love type of an approach where they're monitoring the students, they're mentoring, they're staying in touch, just write a check. And then the goal is really for them to come back because we have a big issue in the Valley of people leaving and then they stay. Like if you go to an engineering school, there's maybe 2 jobs available in the desert for that. And so they leave and they stay. Even like nursing and so forth, a lot of times they leave for nursing school and they stay. And so what excites me is that we're continuing to grow this economy, we're continuing to diversify it, but we're really, as a community, honed in, I think, from a wide range of areas and players in it on workforce development. Because you don't have a good workforce, you don't get economic diversity, you don't get companies moving here. And so those are some of the ways I would characterize the future of the region in terms of like what excites me and what the opportunities are.
Tell me more about the GPS Business Insider. When did you first launch that, and what inspired you to create a news and information platform focused on the Greater Palm Springs?
Well, it's goes back to my past. One point, when I was doing my consulting business, I had the opportunity to buy a company called Wheeler's Desert Letter. Okay, and it was a market intelligence company. They had multiple things, but this Wheeler's Desert Letter was like the venerable newsletter, and it was famous for being like incredibly bland, and I met the people who owned and operated it early in my tenure here because I was used to having market intel and data and analysis available where I grew up in the East Coast, much more mature in terms of business and everything. So I met these people that owned it, and there was a guy named George Wheeler who was in Palm Springs in the early days. He was the one who was like writing about it for his newsletter, what the movers and shakers and the developers and the key people that were building infrastructure, that were creating the amenities, the restaurants, that he was writing about all of it. And he would, write a lot was about like the data, what's going on, how many new housing permits were pulled, what about this, what about that? And it was pretty boring overall, but it had a niche. Landowners needed it, bankers needed it, city governments needed it, all kinds of people needed it, not everybody. And so the business was called Wheeler's Desert Letter. One day I got a call when I just started my consulting business, doing professional services consulting. I got a call from Hans Dubach, the Austrian, with that thick Austrian accent. He's like, Bob, Mary Sue and I have new first grandchild, and she's going to be born in Hawaii. So we're leaving. And Mary Sue and I said, who should we sell the business to? And we both said, of course, Bob. So I'm calling you. Do you want to buy the business? And so one thing led to another, and I bought the business. And so I changed the name from Wheeler's Desert Letter to Wheeler's Market Intelligence. Okay. And then through a series of flukes, I get a lot of these weird flukes. And so I guess that's a big key in life is knowing which opportunities are, quicksand and which ones can help and be something legit and you can make something out of it. And so another opportunity came along where Milt Jones, who was a mentor to me because he had a relationship with a CPA firm I started work here with. I got to know him really well, and he owned a weekly newspaper called The Public Record. And so he called me one day and he said, Bob, I'm getting sick of this public record. He goes, my reps are lazy, blah, blah, blah. They're selling Palm Springs Life ads for $6,500 a page. They're making tons of money on the commissions, and they're not even interested at all in selling advertisements on this public record newspaper. Meanwhile, we've got some good journalism going. We're covering a lot of business, but I just don't, it's killing me. I can't, keep it going. You should buy it. I'm like, here's one of my key mentors. Milt was the founder of Palm Springs Life, for those who don't know who Milt was, and an incredible life story of his. And so when Milt said something, I listened. So I went down to talk with him. One thing leads to another, and he wants to sell it to me for a number that was like way overpriced. And I bailed on it. I said, I can't, I don't think I want to do it. I don't see the numbers working out. And at which point he was like mad at me, not just like displeased, he was mad. And then like 2 months go by and he called me and he's like, all right, here's the thing. I want to sell the public record to you, but you got to tell me today. And I go, and I said, don't go back on our past discussions. Just trust me, drive down to my office. I was in La Quinta, and I want you to hear about this deal. So because I knew him so well, I got in the car, drove down, boom, popped in his office, and he said, all right, here's the deal. $1. And I go, $1? He's like, yeah. He goes, I'll sell it to you for $1. And he had the contract written up. And so he slid across the table. And I'm like, this is not the time to say I need to think about it because I've already gone through due diligence and everything. And so there's a lot of expenses when you have a newspaper and things, but I knew that, I could make something of it. So I said, yes, I'll do it. So he slides it across and I signed it. And then I'm like, okay, I guess that's it, huh? We already talked about what the transition would be before. And so he's like, whoa, where are you going? And I said, I guess we're done, right? I got my copy, you have yours, and we have a transition plan. He's like, no. I want the $1. And so I open up my wallet, and thank gosh I had a one in there. I had some ones, and I handed it to him. He's like, all right. And then he goes, wait a second. Before you go, I just want to say something to you. I'm like, what? And he does the most mentor thing ever. And he goes, Bob, you just bought a cow. And what he meant by that, and I didn't even ask him. I just walked out and I was like, yes, I did. And what he meant is like, it produces milk, but you got to nurture it, right? And so you better kick some butt on this thing, or you might have a cow, but you won't get any milk. And so that's what I took it for. So now all of a sudden I've got a consulting practice going on, doing business development, marketing, PR consulting for a group of clients. Then I've got the market intelligence company for the region, and I've got the weekly business newspaper. And so I thought, boy, this is a good combination. I can tell people about the area. And so that's one of the things. I mean, not an egotistical thing, just a matter of the function of doing those jobs. Just by doing that, I knew more about the Coachella Valley economy than anyone else could possibly have done because I was completely focused on it, every aspect. And so that was that. And so back to the question that you asked me is, why did I start GPS Business Insider? I was running the tournament. I had done a couple other things. And so I was off of that, repertoire. I sold the public record newspaper to be able to be the CEO of the Humana Challenge, which came up out of nowhere. But during the Great Recession, when I was suffering being a marketing business, like everyone was suffering in the community for the most part, in terms of the revenues and the amount of work and everything. And so, that's kind of how I left the business. I left that type of, triumvirate, if you will, those three assets, and just did consulting after the golf tournament. And so then I thought, no one, and as that was happening and I wasn't doing the newspaper because I had sold it, I thought, there's no place for businesses, to tell their story with any level of continuity. The media doesn't care about business, in my opinion. It's even worse. And not only that, is journalism. One of the most important thing about a journalist is their sources, who they know in the community, not for dirt. Who can they rely on? Who can they call and say, this is happening. What's really going on there? And you have the trust, and you have that. I'll go back old school Rolodex. You have that list of people and you've got these relationships. And I thought, I still have those relationships. I know what's going on in the economy, but don't think that business community has an outlet. And then a friend of mine got into a situation that was a bad thing about his business where he was heavily impacted, had to lay off a ton of employees, and I knew how upset he was about it. And meanwhile, you know, he was never getting publicity for some of the incredible things he was doing. The fact that he had 330 employees and he, created an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, to do more for the employees. But when the bad thing happened, they were knocking on the door with the cameras, like, hey, can we interview you about your demise? And so that's when I said, you know what? I'm tired of this. Unless it's negative, there no one's covering much of anything. And then sometimes when they cover it, it's like a tiny little snapshot and it has no context for most people and they don't know really what's behind it. And some of it, like, television and so forth and radio and, broadcast, there's a reason why they have to keep it short. And so I thought, you know what? There's an opportunity. I'm going to go restart what was the public record, which I felt like we had done great journalism. We had created the business journalism that the community needed. Now I don't have it. So now I'm going to start it. But am I going to get back into ink and paper again? No. No. And so I started, and then the GPS stands for Greater Palm Springs. So it's Greater Palm Springs Business Insider. Could have been Coachella Valley Business Insider, but I went with what our, Visit Greater Palm Springs, the incredible entity that's our, destination marketing organization, decided at a certain point they're just going to go with Visit Greater Palm Springs. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go with Greater Palm Springs. And then I came up, I'll do a GPS and, kind of spawn the logo and, the branding and everything. So that's how GPS Business Insider started, and then, I don't know, a few months later, I've got a WordPress, design site up and I'm, doing the same kinds of things I did before. Like I always thought that, I've been in regions and areas where, someone gets a promotion, someone gets hired, they come in from the area and they're out of the area and now they're running the JW Marriott Desert Springs. They never, like, no one covers that. I do. And so I call it GPS people because I think people want to know who's new in town, who got a promotion, why they did, what they're doing. And so then I talked about, and I also cover public sector news. And so what's going on that's coming out of the cities that's related to the economy. They're doing 70%, maybe 80% is not development and economic related. It's running the city, it's public safety, it's parks and recreation, all those kind of things. But the things that they do that impact the economy, I cover that. And so then I have feature articles that I focus on where I'm studying the region, I understand, and something new comes up, or I decide to dig deep into something. Or I cover like the data center issue that you had mentioned because it becomes a controversy. And so it's similar in my old repertoire. I love journalism, I love news, and I'm passionate about like keeping the people in the region informed about what's going on in the business community. And so I thought, you know what, I'll create the venue where businesses can feel comfortable that they can have someone that is not looking, instead of what's wrong with something, what's right with something. But being honest about certain things that are going on out there that might not be in the best interest of a lot of people, and just being like legitimately balanced in journalism only for this region and looking for good and doing it. And so I created it. Ricky, I sometimes timing is great and sometimes it's really bad. And so I started the first version of it about a hot minute before COVID. Okay. And so that was no fun. And so I had to stop it because, there's what was I had to cover? Like, are we on the blue zone, the brown? Can we go back? Can we eat at a restaurant now? Can we walk down the street? And so that was not going to be something that I could do. So I just had to sit it down for a while. And then once we came out of it, I was back in business. And so I've just been pounding away at it, hitting on all the categories in the desert and trying to, and creating something that now has, a big following, a really big following. And so I'm pretty psyched about it and happy. And people, when it's working, when people are calling, emailing, texting, hey, can you cover this? Can you do this? We have the thing. You should know about it. Did you know about this? And then the best version of knowing when you're having an impact is when people call you and say, "There's this thing coming. Could you not cover it?" And so I'm in the middle of it, and we're really booming. It's booming because people want it. It's not everyone. Not everyone cares about business and the economy, but tens of thousands of people in this region do, and I'm serving them.
Well, that is awesome. And you mentioned La Quinta, and I live in Palm Desert. I work in Rancho Mirage. I mean, you're talking about Greater Palm Springs. What do you consider Greater Palm Springs? Is it the whole valley? How far out are you going, and how far are you looking to extend that reach?
It's an important question. I'm glad you asked it. It's really, simple answer is Desert Hot Springs to the west, down to Thermal, Mecca, Salton, North Shore, Salton Sea, which is comprised of 9 cities, right? The incorporated desert cities, 9 of them, and then the unincorporated areas, places like Bermuda Dunes, Thermal, Mecca. But even, there are pockets of unincorporated areas that people might not know generally by name. But so I cover that's my region, and I've always said since I bought Wheelers, and since I had the public record that that's my focus. That's what I want. And then I learned over the years that and then with the internet, of course, changed so much of this business where there are always people in these 20 million people within a 3-hour drive of the desert. There's always someone poking around like, maybe I should buy a strip center. Maybe I should start a business. Maybe we need to move down there and get out of this traffic and set up our software business. But I better learn a little bit about it. And so I learned a long time ago that because to the business people and developers and so forth, especially from out of the area, they have no idea what the difference between, Palm Springs and Cathedral City is. What's the difference between Rancho Mirage and Indio? They're completely different, right? In terms of the business climate and the strengths and weaknesses and everything. And so it's a tough thing to navigate if you're not, sure of it. And so I am that's why I cover the area and call it Greater Palm Springs, but that's really the summary of where it's at, where I cover.
Well, I'll tell you, if I go to Albertsons when I leave work in Rancho Mirage and grab a pizza, or I go to Ralph's in Palm Desert and buy the same pizza, I'm saving $3 or $4 if I go to Ralph's. Like it's right down the road. Like it's wild how different it is.
It's true. And how about Bristol Farms is in Palm Desert, but you go across you go across Monterey and you're in Rancho Mirage to get to that Albertsons, right? Completely different experiences and different cities. And so it is odd. It's funny, Ricky. One of my first memories of coming to the desert, which is ironic, given what I've just said about my background and what I've done since I've been here. But when I first got here for that consulting gig, I remember, and ironically, opening up a copy of the Desert Guide, Milt Jones's publication, and I somehow just opened it right to the middle to the spread. And what was in there? It's their map, right? And each of the 9 cities is colorized in a completely different color. And I'm looking at it and I'm processing, and I was like, Rancho Mirage or like Indian Wells is a city? La Quinta is a city? I thought they were names of country clubs because why? I watched the Bob Hope Classic a million times with my dad. And so when they said these things, I thought it was only country clubs. And so that was my first thing about there's 9 cities here. I just flew over it. How could there be 9 cities? And so we're all stacked up next to each other, and there's so many differences among them, and so many people that don't work in the city where they reside, which in some ways is a really negative thing about the way the valley has grown and built out, and how the cost of housing and certain things is having a real difficult impact on a lot of people on that issue. That's a whole separate topic. Um, yeah, but it's an interesting place. And that's again back to what I said earlier is that's what excites me about it is that there are a lot of differences within it, and there are plenty of examples of cities working together well. I mean, there were years in the past 15, 20 years ago where there was a lawsuit between Cathedral City and Rancho Mirage about the river. Like they just wanted to slow it down. They didn't want Rancho Mirage to suck a bunch of retail sales out of their community. They get nothing out of it because they're right next door. But now you have this cool place. And so we want to solve that with a lawsuit. We had lawsuits over car dealerships and other big taxable sales type items. And they would come out with like environmental impacts of putting a car dealership and why you couldn't do that. And so I think a good thing is that we've gotten past that. We've gotten past it. We're more of a mature economy, more of a mature philosophy about the region in many ways about, we're in this together. And so to your point, going 4 miles from one place to another and having that big of a difference, we can focus on the differences or we can try to focus on the strength of, being working together.
Well, your website is packed with information about businesses and economic development and public affairs and community news. Where is all this information coming from, and how large is your team that's helping gather and verify the facts?
It's a good, it's a, I think the big thing is back to my comment about journalism and journalists is that I have an incredible, realm of and deep bench of, high powered people. I'm not high powered necessarily, but people in positions of knowledge and intel, like not just what's the data, but what's the intel behind it? What does it mean that I can pick up the phone and call them and say, what's this, what's that, and why is it happening? And then when there's something related to their industry, I can just call them, they'll pick up the phone or email them and get input from people to direct me in the right information. And then, I said email and then there's text. And so it's become so much easier over time to be a journalist and to get a wide range of material or topics to cover and to be able to gather it because of the internet, because now of AI, in terms of understanding certain elements and topics and being able to do deep research without having to do all of it yourself. And so, just like the productivity of everyone in our country that's, working in a job or whatever, and entrepreneurs and businesses, the productivity surrounding journalism has gotten much better, which is kind of when you think about it, the rest of journalism should be getting better too. Instead, it's not because they don't want to pay for talent. And so the journalists are kind of pushed to the side. So I'm able to really, scrape a ton of information through, easier research than has ever been and through my relationships and then understanding the dynamics. And so, I mean, it's as simple as, having a spreadsheet of the 20 topics, some that you cover on a rotating basis. Like, is it the retail sales? Is it changes in commercial real estate stats? Like, what's going, is the return to office theme that you see every once in a while, like Silicon Valley saying, no, you can't live in Sacramento anymore. You got to come back and we need you in the office. We built this giant Apple facility and we didn't build it to be empty. You got to come back. And so I'm the kind of person that's driving down the street and I'm like, what are our companies doing? What's our return to the office situation? And so I'll put it on the spreadsheet. And so I don't want to, understate it, but I don't want to glorify it either. It's in many ways, it's as simple as that. I've, been around here so long that I, have a long list of things to cover. And then I'm always looking for what's new, what's going on. So it's a lot of work. And I do have a couple people that help me out in terms of surfacing ideas and, intern type stuff, writing, drafting, helping out with some research. And then I take it from there. So you're not talking to a big business dude here.
Well, you're doing a good job with it if that's the case. And I'm curious
Thanks. Thank you.
how often you're publishing content. I mean, are you following a publishing schedule or are you just posting as stuff comes across your desk?
I'm publishing it just based on, what bottom line is I need to keep it fresh and going. So I need people to know that there's going to be new content and to search for it and to look towards it. Just like any of us, if we had a subscription to the New York Times, you open it when you feel like, And some subscriptions that we have, we want to look at every day. Like I'll read the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and LA Times and a couple others like every day. Just read as much as I can that's reasonably relevant. I'm not looking at I might look at the New York Times recipes, but generally I'm avoiding the journalism about sports, weather, crime, politics and stuff, and I'm focusing in on the things that they do. So I want my base of like readers to feel like the same way. If they want to keep up on what's happening, check in. And then it also stimulate them to check in. Every Friday, I do a weekly, I call, it's an e-newsletter, right? So it's today's version of a newsletter. And it's called the Insider Weekly. And so Insider, again, it's not just a name I came up with. It goes back to that data versus intel. It goes back to, reporting only on something when it's wrong versus reporting on what's going on in the economy, in business, in the region. And so that's kind of the outlook of it, and that's how I see it. And so I'm posting something every day. So sometimes it's a big feature like the data center situation going on in the Eastern Coachella Valley. It'll be a 2,000 word comprehensive article with current activities, what's going on, and then context in terms of how do we get here, why did this happen, where did it come from, and so there's a variety of things, and then sometimes, and then I get a lot of press releases. So part of the job of being a journalist is letting or owning an entity like this is doing everything you can within constraints of time and resources to say, send me your news. Pick up the phone and call me. Is something going on out there? Call me. Don't call me just because I'm not the guy you call if there's dirt, like someone's stealing money, someone's, embezzling, someone's self-dealing, whatever. That's not me. But if there's something cool going on, did you hear about that big land sale of the property on Indian Canyon, of all the acres around that interchange? I didn't know it sold. It did. Tell me. Boom, article. Okay. And so then I dig in and do it from there. So that's really kind of how it works. It's kind of like the other side of the PR role, right? And I've been in that position a long time. And it's another reason why I feel like I'm helping the business community, because I'm letting people know that I want to hear your good news, and I want to hear what's happening and what's good. Whereas if you're on that PR side, it's a lonely world most of the time. You're sending things out to the media. You might send a press release with has a little pitch on it. Like your readers, because they care about blah blah blah, might be interested in this, and it's from my client, and now they're like, oh, press release. They're trying to sell something, and so it's a difficult world out there for the PR person. So I'm trying to make it easier and say, send me your news. Call me with something, if it's specific to one of your clients or your business individually, whatever it is. I can't say I can publish everything or do everything, but I'll take a look. You have a welcome home here to at least pitch it and tell your story. It's not going to go into some email, list like I suspect they have at some of the places around here where there's like 170 of them, and they're not even going to look at 70 of them at all because they just don't have the time. So that's part of it.
So if I've got something that I want to cover, I mean, I'm talking about the golf course project we did last summer at the Springs, or the new clubhouse that just opened at the Lights at Indio. How do you determine what is newsworthy enough to be featured?
Well, it's just kind of a discretionary thing that's not a perfect exact science. But I would say everything that you said there, it perks my ears up, And so what I'm really covering is a variety of key categories, right? New development, new businesses, business transactions, people on the move. And then, in terms of the news side. So what's new? The Springs has this edition. Like I've been hearing, by the way, about the Springs, and like out of nowhere, people are like, did you hear about the Springs? They went from like not really having much pickle. This is a while ago, not having much pickleball to it's the best place in the whole region. Did you hear about the Springs? They redid the clubhouse and they did this, and so I have thought about them. And sometimes I'll just pick up the phone and contact and say, I keep hearing about this, what's going on over there. I'd like to cover it. I was over at H&H Bagels. So it sounds like we're living pretty close to each other here in Palm Desert, Ricky. And so for the first time, I went over to H&H Bagels, the one from like the famous Manhattan bagel place. And the guy just started the franchise. Have you seen it?
I have. I drive by it every single day on my way to and home from work. I haven't been in yet though.
So I'm an old school, East Coast bagel kind of lover, but I do recognize that it's not good for the belly fat. So I'm not going to be over there every day, but I finally yesterday for the first time found my way over. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go get myself a poppy seed and the sesame seed and some plains for my son. And we're going to try these out because it's the old school. Like they boil them first, then they bake them. That's why the New York bagels are so different. So it's a franchise and it's the first one of the first ones I think in California. They just started franchising it. And so I went in there. It was like you almost would need like uh you'd almost need like earplugs. It was so raucous, rocking. And then, so when I see something like that, I'm like, yes, this is great. I mean, almost essentially mid-June, and the place is popping. And like nowhere else was like that, and just in the middle of this thing in that strip center, the place had like there were 30 people in there. There were probably a dozen employees just running around making like every version of a breakfast sandwich to avocado toast on the bagels to everything. And I was like, holy moly. So then this guy pops up. He goes, can I help you? And I go, I just want like 4 bagels and I'm out of here. And he's like, all right, good. Throws them in the bag. I walked over to the register and I saw this guy. And I remember, I think I saw something about him related to he owns like a sandwich franchise. And I said, are you the owner? And he said, yeah. I said, I'd love to do a story on this. I mean, I want to do the whole thing. I told him I own GPS and I looked at him and I go, I promise I'm not trying to sell you anything and I won't. I just want to get the story because this is so cool that you're booming, right away when you open. And so he and I are going to have a call tomorrow morning and he's going to tell me a story. I'm going to write an article about it. And so I think that's pretty fun in terms of launching new information and like being supportive of the people in the community. They're putting their money on the line, investing in the region and taking a risk, right?
Well, a lot of these media outlets have paywalls. Is GPS Business Insider free to access, or is a subscription required? Is there a payment plan? Like, how do I access all of this information?
It's free. You can just go to gpsbusinessinsider.com and have at it. And so I have a group of sponsors that help. These are people that that I have as clients that over the years and friends that are helping support the journalism and being a part of it. And so I get the revenue from that, and so I'm not trying to double dip and charge people for subscriptions. I have enough revenue from the things that I do to be able to support it without charging subscriptions. And so I really do want people to see it. Now, I don't devalue anyone else's journalism that has paywalls. They have their business model and I don't like knock it or whatever. Some of them are nonprofit organizations and they have a donation button, attached to every story and whatever. Fine, whatever anyone wants to do. But my platform is free in terms of the business news.
Well, in addition to the website, you also publish a weekly newsletter called The Insider. What can readers expect from that? Is it the same content, just republished and reformatted? Is it different content? How do you differentiate between the two?
Yeah, it's called the Weekly Insider, and so every Friday I send out. Almost got 5,000 opt-in free subscribers that it's emailed out to, and I guess the way I would characterize it is it's my top 5 articles from the week that was. And so it just gives people a concise grouping of articles that I think are my best ones that I think that people would really want to see. So that kind of helps with people say, that, again, take that New York Times subscription. There might be sometimes that someone would not look at it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and forget they even have the subscription if they don't care about it like I do in terms of using it so intensely as a resource. So it's in part it's like a reminder that here we are, we're over here. Here are our best 5 stories, but then you click on them and you get into the ecosystem, and now you might poke around and see something else that you didn't know, or learn something else that's new to you. And so it's really a combination of those things. Our 5 best articles and stories. And I'm going to continue to develop it. I'm going to start incorporating videos. So if someone wants a 3-minute synopsis of what the 5 best articles we did of a week, then I'm going to, have these videos, create a YouTube channel. I already have it, but I need to build upon it. And so people can have their choice on media, because we know not everyone consumes media the same way. Not everyone wants to read a long article or even a medium length article. So I'm going to be incorporating um, you know, video in it as well. So it's really a combination of things. And some people just don't have the time to go dig into the website and snoop around and read things. They'd rather just have this, let's call it a curated group of hot topics delivered right into their inbox.
Just giving you the idea, since you're on a podcast, maybe you should consider starting a podcast where you just read the articles. I mean, that could be an option too. I'm just ways to get into our AirPods.
Yeah, you're right. And so the question is, I've got clients that I'm doing podcasts for, and so I know how much time and energy it takes going into it. So at this point, that's like a little bit of a stretch for me to do both. But it's not like don't know the impact of podcasts and the importance and the growth in the sector. In fact, maybe you like to opine on this. You've looked at my website. You've looked at GPS Business Insider, and you see how those different categories, the featured up top and center, then there's business and development news, public sector news, and so on. I just was thinking, drive down the street idea earlier this week. What if I did a section that were local podcasts? And so maybe if I wrote, like I picked 5 to 10, cool podcasts that are at least tangentially related to the economy, business, consumerism, some, things related that aren't completely unrelated. And I could have a section that highlights some podcasts that others are doing, like yours, for example. I think that could be pretty cool too, because I think podcasting is easy to do, generally from just creating it. When I say easy, it's easier in some ways, I think it's easier to create the content than it is to actually get it distributed, in a way that works. And so that's part of what I do for a living, is help people, create content, things that demonstrate professional expertise, create news or whatever. But if you don't have distribution, if you're doing it as a for-profit type of thing, if and distribution matters to someone, that's doing a podcast for a law firm, or how financial management podcasts, they care, they're doing it to generate awareness and lead to new clients, new business. But a lot of times they're just dead in the water because they don't know how to effectively and consistently get it in front of people that would consume it. And so I'm thinking this might be something I could add, and maybe I could add like this week's, cool podcast to that newsletter. What do you think?
I love it, and I think that podcast hosts would love that opportunity to be able to get exposure, especially locally. I mean, this podcast is not necessarily local. It's just neat when I get the opportunity to interview somebody from the Coachella Valley, but I think that's an awesome idea, and then it'd be neat to also see who else in this valley is producing a show.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hear every once in a while, oh, there's this one, there's that one, but look, there's obviously a place where they all reside. They're places, right? They're on the core national platforms for it. But if you're not thinking about it, you're not looking at it, you might have no idea that the XYZ, personal finance, show from Rancho Mirage is there. You probably won't. And so I think that's what happens a lot with business is, creating things in terms of content is half of it, maybe less than half. Getting it out there and having people, consume it whether it's a video, an article, an audio, video podcast, that's where it's make or break for the people that are doing it with a profit-oriented motive, or at least a brand awareness motive and both. So anyway, that's my drive down the street idea for the week of how I can improve the business. And so sometimes I have to, not sometimes, like most days I have to like try to constrain myself of just focus on what you got right now and stop trying to do, more things. But then again, I want to keep inventing and building. It's the key is I guess knowing what things to pursue and which ones not, right?
Tell me more about your strategic partners, and that's including folks like the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce, Mead Commercial, and others. And how do those relationships support your mission?
I think it's just, I call them, partnerships instead of just saying, oh, these are sponsors. And that's what you call them. And it's actually exactly right, strategic partners. And so, again, back to this notion of it's next to impossible to get, good, solid subject matter expertise published or presented into the media. It's also, quite the challenge to go in there and tough it out with search engine optimization, because it can be expensive and it can be, incredibly competitive in your field. And so, in the case of like, let's say Mead Commercial, yeah, it's an incredibly successful business, but they just made a change recently. They went from my good longtime friend Scott Wilson. They went from Wilson Mead Commercial to Mead because Scott retired. And so Michael Mead is now, in a rebranding, repositioning phase. The business runs exactly the same as it did, except for Scott's not coming through the door every day, and he's not a partner with Michael making the decisions. And so there was a need for them to really kind of get the word out and let people know that we made the change and so forth. But at the same time, the partnership element of this is they have access to like the nth level of data and intel about commercial real estate, which is a giant body of sectors, right? It's everything from uh, retail centers, office, land, industrial space, multifamily housing. And so I've always found commercial real estate agents to be like the most, the best educated people on the local economy because they're dealing with it at the very on the ground, literally level. And so it's a good two-way street. So they're able to give me information. And so that article that I talked about as an idea of like what's going on. Are we doing return to office? And how would we know? Well, my partners at Mead, we're working on an article to talk about it and like what's going on with commercial office in the desert. Are people coming back in this small town? Are they still telecommuting? And how do we know? Well, they know because they're, dealing with clients every day and they know what people are telling them. But at the same time, they have the data to show. We went from like 20% vacancy, after the recovery from the pandemic to now it's hovering around, like 4 or 5%. So that's valuable for the people in the community that care about these types of things, and at least to get like another, chunk of knowledge base about what's going on in the economy where your business operates, even if it's completely different, and it gives you a reference point and lets you understand it. So then there's been a lot, too, then you're in the same area as I am. If we drive up and around northern Palm Desert, it's like a boom town up there on both residential single family housing, but also the multifamily, the apartments that are going up, pretty astounding. So I'm the kind of guy I drive by those things and I'm like, who's renting those and why? Where are they from? Are they from the region? Are they moving up from somewhere else where they're living 2 or 3 generations in a household and they were able to move up and they're taking down those apartments? Either way, I want to know. I drive through the parking lot and look like, oh man, there's a lot of out-of-state license plates. That must be good. But the best way to do it is to call a guy like Tom Tokheim, who is a developer of that Millennium Apartments up on what is it called? I guess it would be Dinah Shore Drive, north side of the town, and say, ask them the questions that I just threw out. And so I think that having that kind of a relationship, but then Mead, in this case, my partner has experts in multifamily. So I just ask them, like, what's the absorption rate? What's the vacancy? How many new units are coming on board? And then why? And who's financing them? And why are the rates either so high or really low for the quality of the building? So I think I beat that one to death enough. But and so that's an example of an expert in that category. So I've got a law firm. So when legal issues come up and when they want to talk about a wide range of things that are happening. I've done articles for like Valerie Powers Smith as a incredible trust and estate planning attorney, but also with a powerhouse trust litigation practice where, the ne'er-do-well, brother moved to the Midwest 20 years ago, never heard from him. And then mom dies and he comes in, he's like, hey, let's talk about the money, and then they got to sue each other and that kind of thing. And so she can, write articles about her experiences and I can post them and it could help people to say, yeah, we better, what, we haven't updated our family trust in a while. We've had two divorces and a couple new babies and they're not in the documents. What if, the patriarch of the family dies? We're unsure where the money goes. And so she's writing articles about that. One super popular one we did because Val is such a animal lover. She's got, polo ponies and a couple rescue dogs that are amazing. And I saw that Diane Keaton, the deceased actress, the great Diane Keaton, passed away. She left $5 million to Reggie. Who's Reggie? Her golden retriever. And so that was one of my most read articles, is because Valerie's like, yeah. She's like, I have an elaborate plan for my horses and my dogs. Like, if I pass away, I have instructions on who the veterinarians are, what the annual cost will be. I have an annual budget built out, what foods they like. But if you don't have that, who knows what's going to happen to them, and like where, who will pay for the stables and everything. And so we did this article about Diane Keaton's Reggie, and that there's a thing called pet trusts. And so, my gosh, so many people read that article. Like, I don't know, 5,800 people read the Diane Keaton, don't, left money for Reggie article that was written by me and Valerie. And so that's another version of the Chamber of Commerce, is something where, we're helping each other promote each other. And at the same time, we want to talk about like what a Chamber of Commerce really does besides having events and networking. What are the things that they've got that are initiatives? How do they see the economy? And so they get, we do longer articles. And so it's a two-way street on the partners. It's not just like write a check and then Bob goes and does everything. Like, they're in the mix too. And I'm not going to take just anybody. These are people I've known over a long time, and I trust in them and they trust in me to make sure that together we bring the best information out to the community.
You have assembled an editorial advisory board. Tell me a little bit more about Fred and Deborah and Gretchen and Alan and how they're helping
Yeah,
your
I mean
organization.
it's kind of stalled a little bit because I haven't like rebuilt it the way I wanted to yet, but I'm just, ready to do it. These are what I need is, ears to the ground. And so I'm going to grow that. I want to have a dozen people soon. I've talked to a bunch of people and they're ready to jump on, but each person on the editorial advisory board just basically, augments my news gathering capability, right? And it's like, did you hear about the thing? Did you know that this warehouse that was planned actually was abandoned and they moved over a city because of the blah, blah, blah. And then this is what happened. So they're like eyes and ears that augment what me and my team can do already. And they serve as a sounding board on something too. So I pick up the phone, call them, and just got to buy them lunch once a quarter and be nice. And so, these are people I've known a long time and that I know that are experts in certain fields all throughout the valley. And so I go out of my way and so in my new form of it is going to be, a wide range of people with different interests, as diverse as possible in terms of all kinds of ways of diversity and especially geographical diversity, so I can capture as much as I want. It's part of the whole news gathering process.
Well, from your vantage point at GPS Business Insider and GPS Market Intel, what's the biggest opportunity for the Coachella Valley right now? Like, what are some of the things that those that are listening at home and that are living here could be looking at?
I think that I think there's a good ecosystem that's been brewing for small entrepreneurs. I think that one of the biggest opportunities is entrepreneurship because there's such a support structure that's been developed in the last several years. Everything from the Cal State San Bernardino Palm Desert campus having what they call the ERC, the Entrepreneurial Resources Center, and ongoing programming. Then we have an active chapter of what's called, the acronym is SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives that volunteer time to help nurture and assist entrepreneurs to help them build. It's like the government giving money, having a budget on these things and paying for it because they know if they nurture and build better entrepreneurs, that the tax base will be bigger and better. And so it's kind of like everyone wins in doing it. So we have a lot of women's focused entrepreneurial organizations and networking entities that provide this. And so I think that's kind of a good opportunity for entrepreneurs to grow a company. And so when I was working on what was called the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership in 1994, like right when I got here, I was deep in it. I knew it was a good thing for me personally, for my career, to be involved in this group. And so I just kept showing up. I got like the East Coast nature of me kept, I'm just like, show up. What can I do it faster than they expected and do it better. And I kept moving up the ranks in it. And so we set forth with a mission of diversifying the Greater Palm Springs Coachella Valley economy, by getting different types of jobs, by trying to recruit them. Okay. And so tourism and agriculture, were always the biggest industries, and they really still are, other than healthcare has, just gotten more and more robust as more people have retired here, along the way. And so, um, these are things that we can, keep an eye on, that we can build upon, and that people want to know more about because they're emerging. So those categories continue to thrive. But then we want to get more um, businesses that come here. And so when you really look at it, it can be easy to say, oh, we need this, we need that. But the reality and the reality of it, when it comes down to will someone move their business, from one place to another, it has to make like a lot of sense from various perspectives. And so I think what is the opportunity here, with, a easier way to, promote, with the internet and with search engine optimization and with social media and, geofencing of social media, is to be able to go out and put messages in front of those types of companies that would match up here the best, and not to be phony about it. Like, you should move your large scale, industrial plastics manufacturing facility here. It just doesn't make sense. And so why waste the time? We have to be honest with ourselves. And so what happened all the way back in 1994 is that I progressed fast in that group of volunteers, and they said, well, why don't you be our chairman of our marketing committee? And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. As soon as I agreed to it, the regional representative from the County of Riverside's Economic Development Office called me and said, hey, I got some good news. What is it? I just got like a $25,000 grant that I'm allowed to use like on a discretionary basis. Like, what if we did a study of the Coachella Valley in terms of like what are the best opportunities for us, in terms of real legitimate business attraction? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so we did it. And you know what? It still rings true. The main finding back then was that we should focus on owner operated companies with focus. This is focus, not everything. Owner operated companies with 50 or less employees that are already in California. Okay. And that sentence, it rings true to this minute. right? Because we're going to go to Nevada where there's no personal sales tax for the owners. We're going to, and the state taxes are lower. The regulations are like 1/10 of the burden that they are in California or Arizona. Pick one, right? They're going to laugh us out of the office. They're going to not look at the materials. And so we've got to, we've got to talk to companies that are already in California and then maybe are a little sick of LA traffic. It takes them 20 minutes just to get down the street to lunch and then 20 minutes back, and so they're just sick of it. They want to make a move, and we've got all this space, all this natural beauty. Yes, it's hot in the summer, but could you, in today's world with technology, could you own and operate a business, the same one that you're doing in Los Angeles, in other areas? I keep beating up LA, but places that are undesirable, or Orange County, where the cost of living and cost of employees and running a business is just getting to the max. Could you just take it and reset it here? And so we don't need 1,000 of them, but the opportunity is great for them and it's great for us if we can attract them to come here and basically say, you could, like a gaming company, someone that's making video games, someone that's doing, movie illustrations, people that are doing editing, people that are doing all kinds of things. Well, heck, someone could run a business like GPS Business Insider that's based in Eugene, Oregon. They could, because it rains every damn day up there, they could move it down here and still report on Eugene, Oregon, right? And so maybe they're not employing a whole ton of people, but they might still go to Jessup Motors to get their car. Next car, they might go to Mathis Brothers to get their furniture. They'll go to the same Albertsons that you and I go to, and now all that is taxed. And then they bring their family members in for visits, and the TOT is taxed. And so that's like, I think is like an accretive type of way to build the regional economy that's legit and reasonable. And then you know what? We saw it happen for a different reason. It was the motivation was different than getting an email saying, "Hey, you ever thought about moving your business down to the desert?" The motivation was this is the time to get the hell out of this area, during the pandemic, where all of a sudden I've got Zoom available and I've got, Google, everything. And that they made the move and we had telecommuters left and right. And so that's kind of some of the opportunities that I see right now is to it's like Back to the Future. It's the same reason in '94 as it is now in many cases. The core premise to move out here uh, for the similar reasons.
Well, it seems like everyone is talking about artificial intelligence and how it can help their business. I use it all day, every day. How are you using AI to help keep your readers informed?
Well, I think it's all part and parcel to the things I've been talking about, the news gathering side of it, the research, deep research capabilities that are available are so much better. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of subscriptions. I don't. There are some entities, like even a couple in the desert here, but throughout the country that are just basically, they might maybe it's like a public meeting or whatever, and it's just like the article is generated entirely from artificial intelligence, and they just publish it. That I might have artificial intelligence helping me on research and maybe the framework of something, but I write the articles. I don't just let them go for AI. So to write it, and so I think that, but it just shortens the information curve is like the primary reason for me. And then if you want to talk specifically about it, I started reading some articles about Claude in terms of the, um, graphical and video capabilities. And I was astounded by them, like kicking myself. I'm like, I should have switched over to this a long time ago. So I had to do a presentation I did a presentation for the city of Indio, the Chamber of Commerce. It was the Indio State of the Business Community. And I had like soup to nuts, everything that you would want to know about the numbers of, representing the economy in Indio, from demographics to retail sales to transient occupancy tax collections and where it comes from and why. But man, that that was going to be a bear to just open up that white rectangle of PowerPoint and start from that. So I'm like, let me just try Claude. And oh my goodness, the quality and the beauty of it was astounding. So it's my information, my data, and then I had to learn how to prompt it effectively. And I've got a better PowerPoint presentation than I've ever done in my life by far. Did I have to tweak it? Did it, was I buying extra tokens and saying, could you change this? Could you make sure you put the logo exactly as it was represented instead of your new version? Oh, sorry about that. And it fixes it. But meanwhile, I cut off dozens of hours, I'm certain, on this, and it got the great look and feel with my information. So that's kind of those are the ways that I'm using it.
Well, tell me more about your work with the PGA Tour and the Humana Challenge, and what did you learn from that experience? I'm eager to dive into this.
I mean, here again, Ricky, another kind of a fluke, right? And so, um, my background with my dad and the Bob Hope Classic and our love for it over the years, and my whole background in, being just amateur golf and everything. And so I get out to the desert, and there's no way I would miss. I'm like, I can actually go to it. So I was like constantly at the tournament, involved in it, the whole thing. Loved it. I loved the celebrity side of it. I loved all of it. And then we had that 3-year lull where Chrysler had to resign their sponsorship after 50 years. They resigned their sponsorship with a one-page letter, which ended up being in the desk that I occupied. And I read that letter multiple times. And it was basically, we truly regret to inform you that we just can't keep the sponsorship going because it would be improper for us to take, federal government money. And it was a TARP program, right, for the Great Recession. It was basically well, I can't remember what the acronym stood for, but it was, basically billions of dollars were given to the auto industry by the United States government so that it didn't collapse. And then the good part is, our government made money off of that because of the terms. We ended up making money. One of the only times in history they've done something like this and it worked. But meanwhile, Chrysler was in a giant crisis, and they just couldn't possibly, take that federal government money from taxpayers while everyone was suffering and they're out, whooping it up at a golf tournament. It was like the general feel, right? And so we had that lull, and I was really sad. And I met one of the board members out at an event one day, and he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "It's getting down to the wire now. I mean, they were such good stewards, Desert Classic Charities, the nonprofit, the old model. It's kind of get dissipating less and less." Was where you would have like a local host organization, it was called, which was a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization that like was the host organization for the tournament. And you could say like they ran the tournament, but they didn't really run the tournament. Like the PGA Tour people came in, thank goodness, and ran, the tournament itself. But all year long, you're trying to, sell hospitality, sponsorships, and pro-am spots and everything, all to help augment the revenue of the tournament beyond what the title sponsor pays, and to also yield back, the net proceeds or a portion of the net proceeds, depending on the tournament, to the community. It was the Dean Beeman methodology, right? He's the one, he was the commissioner of the PGA Tour before Tim Fincham, and he's the one who instilled that. And I've seen it, I've seen him interviewed on television. I've seen the old interviews, from when he talked about it. And he said, it just occurred to me that, there's not everyone plays golf in a community. And then now we have the internet, we have the research, and we can look at the National Golf Foundation, for example. Last time I looked, it wasn't like yesterday, but something like 5% of a given community actually considers themselves to be a golfer, in certain areas. In some areas, it might be 2%, right? And so how are we going to make all this money, for the PGA Tour players and have people come buy tickets if most of them don't care about golf? Okay. And so the reason, the method he came up with which was ingenious, is, well, let's do an incredible amount of charity. So if I go to someone who's running a business and no on the pro-am, don't play, no on the hospitality, my clients don't care about golf, no on, but I would say, well, why don't you buy a block of 20 tickets? Write a check for $500, and that money will go to the local charities. I saw on your resume that you're a member of the Boys and Girls Clubs at Coachella Valley, and last I checked, we're writing a check for $25,000 for the last 10 years in a row for your organization. Can you just buy a block and have your sales reps like hand out the tickets to people? Like, yeah, I'll do that. And so that wouldn't have happened without Dean Beeman and his methodology of being a great force for charity in the communities where they played the PGA Tour events, right? And so that was, I think, was a great thing that happened, and why the tournaments survived and did so well in small markets like this. So one thing leads to another. I exposed more to the people involved, but I felt terrible. Like, oh my gosh, Chrysler's gone. And so since the Desert Classic Charities board had like these business people that were very successful, so many of them, they were great stewards with the money that they collected, which was way above the other tournaments because of the pro-am, right? The famous, you play in the tournament with the PGA Tour players while they're in their scoring rounds. It's not a Wednesday, not a Tuesday where they're just hit and giggle pro-ams. You're in the mix. And there was only us and AT&T Pebble Beach overall. And so they squirreled away a ton of money, but it was running out after 3 years of not having a title sponsor. And so there's no $8 million to cover the purse. And so the thing was running on fumes. And so, I heard about this and everything. And then it got after that, discussion with the gentleman, you know, nothing. There's nothing. And then there's rumors. It's gone. It's gone. And so we don't have a title sponsor. All of a sudden, I was driving down the street and I heard a radio announcement. A friend of mine, Dennis Arcuri, was the radio guy, and he was announced it. And he said, "There's going to be this new thing. There's going to be a partnership between the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation and Humana. They're going to serve as title sponsors for the tournament." And so the tournament is saved. And this was like, I don't know, like August, right? Before, not like a hot minute in those terms of running a tournament and selling all the things you have to do and all the planning you have to do for a January tournament. And then I heard something that changed like my life really, which was Dennis said, there's going to be a thing that the Clinton Foundation does, and they're calling it like a Health Matters Conference. And so they're going to have a conference during the week of the tournament, and it'll be part of the whole thing. And so it's not golf, but it's going to be part of the tournament, which is why the Clinton Foundation wanted to do it. And then they're going to create an initiative called the Health Matters Initiative, where they're going to try to raise money, and they're going to study the Coachella Valley regional healthcare situation, which has always been terrible and worse than ever now in terms of access to services and care and the costs and everything. And we're going to do all that. And so I happen to be the consultant for Desert Regional Medical Center, working directly with the CEO, Carol Lee Soul, at the time. And so I pulled over into a parking lot and I called Carol Lee and I said, "Oh my gosh, Carol Lee, I think I've got something that," and my job for the hospital was to help, people understand that their capabilities in like what I think it's called like the high revenue and reimbursement categories, like, elective surgery, hip replacements, knee replacements, and things where they made the most money. And, healthcare is a competition. So they were competing against Eisenhower Medical Center. And it was like hard competition. It wasn't like unethical, but both sides were like trying to outmuscle the other. I mean, they both generate probably $2 billion in revenue a year. So it's worth, fighting for to win on the business competitive side. And I told Carol Lee, she's like, "Well, what does that have to do with us?" And I said, "Well, you know, we could take some of the halo effect that Eisenhower has by being affiliated with the tournament for all these years, because Bob and Doris Hope gave the land, blessed by President Eisenhower, and with them basically gave the land so that Eisenhower Medical Center could be built. And then the tournament essentially helped build the hospital over the years. And so we're on the outside of that at Desert Regional. We're way outside of that. And so she's like, "Get over to my office tomorrow." She's like, build up a report and tell me everything you're thinking." So one thing leads to another. We became the sponsors of the Clinton's Health Matters Conference. And so then it was just like a real, without getting all the details, there's some incredible, interesting stories about what happened. But as part of the negotiation, I said, they're like, is there anything else? Because I was hitting them hard because it was late and they didn't have a sponsor. Even the Clinton Foundation didn't have really, they didn't have a sponsor for the conference. And Carol Lee wanted to sponsor it, even though it was a big number, almost $500,000. Okay. And so they said, is there anything else? And I said, yes, president has to come to the hospital. Like, what are you talking about? I said, we have to have some kind of an event for the community leaders where the president attends. They're like, well, that's impossible. There's no way we're doing it. Because I envisioned the president in the motorcade driving from La Quinta Resort past Eisenhower and to my client's place. And that happened. It ended up happening. And so he knew me because President Clinton knew me because he knew that I brought the money in. And so, got the chance to meet and talk with him a little bit. And then all of a sudden, became a member of the board because of that, bringing the money in to help with that part of the tournament. It was part of it. And then the CEO, prior to me, his wife was, terminally ill, and he had to quit. And he said, "I want to recommend you." So this was in the depths of the Great Recession, Ricky, when I was real like working like three times as hard for half the money, and they're basically going to give me an extremely high paying job running the tournament that my dad and I revered throughout my youth. Okay. And so that was another one like, yeah, yes, I'll do it. And so that's how I got the position and took it from there. So it was kind of another one of those weird coincidences and stories that happened in my life that got me into that position.
And that's cool. Thanks for sharing all that with me and keep this golf ball rolling. You were also involved with Billy Casper and the Big Three and Me. Tell me more about that project and your connection to one of golf's true legends.
Boy, that was a treat. It was a pleasure. And again, in my life, it happened as a fluke. I was representing a law firm. And they said, "Hey, we got this person who's been a friend of the firm for a number of years. He's a senior, top-notch superstar trial lawyer, and we're going to bring him into the firm. And so, could you, just go introduce yourself to him, and then, figure out a way to help promote him, get him on the website, et cetera, et cetera." So I met with him, Jim Parkinson, who's still a friend of mine now, and we're doing a new project together. And we're having a chat here, and so we're talking about things. And he goes, "Hey, by the way," he goes, "You a golfer?" And I go, "Oh yeah." And he goes, "You ever heard of Billy Casper?" And I looked at him. This is a guy I just met, but he's if you met him, you'd be like his best friend. No, with your personality, you guys would be fast friends within about 4 minutes. And I looked at him and I go, "Duh, of course. Of course I know who Billy Casper was." And I go, he never got the due that he should have, in my opinion. And by the way, I met Billy Casper when he opened up the whatever, I think it was the Shadow Hills, where he was like the designer. And I said, I thanked him. I shook his hand and thanked him because, two-thirds of the holes, are right to left holes, and I draw the ball and I can't stop drawing the ball. And so I thanked him and he laughed and I said, he was a really nice guy. And he goes, "That's funny you said that. So you don't think Billy got his due?" And I go, "There's no way." I go, "Didn't he win? Like, isn't he like in the top 10 of, PJ Tour victories?" He's like, "Yeah. In fact, he's number six behind Byron Nelson and by one." And I go, "Yeah, that's amazing." He goes, "Oh, the reason I asked you about Billy is my friend Lee Benson and I from Salt Lake City area and I are writing a book about Billy's life." And he goes, "We've been talking about it. It's like we're going to write the book and everything, but who's going to promote it?" And he goes, "Are you interested?" And I'm telling you, it was like a life-changing moment. I'm looking in his face. I'm like, am I interested in helping with a book project about a great legend of golf? You're darn right I am. And so one thing led to another. And so like I didn't write any of it. Like I helped edit it. I gave input. We had 10, these guys are professionals when it comes to writing and publishing books. And so it was an intense process. And so I weighed in, but I helped design the cover. It was like an old photo of Billy. It was a photo of Billy on like the sixth green at Olympic Club in the playoff with Arnold Palmer in the 1966 U.S. Open, where Billy drained like a 35 footer that was just like a stab on Arnie. And he, it went on to prevail, but it was this really cool photo, but it was black and white. So I came up with the idea of like colorizing Billy and leaving the background black and white, and we created. So that was like my biggest contribution. But then I was the one that was, promoting the book, and part of that was, going around the country to some of the places where Billy had won. And so think about this. Like what I remember at the end of the project, when we finally just said, all right, I think we've had our run, I was like, Jim said to me, he's like, well, was it worth it? And I go, look, I go, if I add up the number of hours I spent on this thing, I probably made like $3.50 per hour. But the things I got to see and do, like following Billy around, where they treated him like gold at the US Open. We were in the player family dining the whole time. I'm interviewing him in front of the Olympic Club membership 6 months earlier, a night with Billy Casper with giant banners. And, we're talking about Billy's life and story. I was in the room at the Ryder Cup in the player family dining and involved, in that Ryder Cup because Billy still to this day holds the record for the most points of an American Ryder Cup player. He has the most points. And I don't see that record being beat for a long time when you really look at who's still on the team and how many points they have. And so I was in the mix. And then the coup de grace was we were going to make a big deal because Billy won the Masters in 1970 and he's beloved, in that champions locker room and everything. And so Billy, it's like, well, we're going to go down to Augusta and we're going to sell books. And there's a strip center across the street on Washington Road down there, right across from Augusta National Golf Club, where they have like this corporate facility for things like this, like for banquets and stuff that's in the middle of a strip center. And I forget what it's called, but anyway, you can do it. So we booked something, and then I ended up selling. I heard about this guy who was like a crazy Billy Casper fan, but a golf nut. And it turns out he was like the global managing partner for Deloitte, a multi-billion-dollar international firm. And he's like, well, how can I get Billy to do an event for us for my clients, because I've got 60 clients that are going to be there, and so we did. How about a night with Billy Casper? Pay us a certain amount of money, which is a good amount of money, and everyone gets a book. Billy will sign every one of them. He'll talk to everybody, and then we'll do an interview with Billy. He tells us stories because these are great stories, and then people can ask him questions and everything. So he's like, done. And then we had all those set up. So meanwhile, I'm on the way, from Atlanta, driving in, pull over, this is my second time at the Masters, and we got to their house, which was a beautiful, sprawling house for the big Casper family. He had 5 kids of his own and he adopted 6, he and Shirley, his wife, and they were all there. And I'm out in front of the driveway, walked in and said hi to everybody, and I'm here. And my friend Dean came with us. He's a photographer, professional photographer. Said, Dean, we can work you in, use one of the family credentials to get into Augusta to the Masters, but you need to be like our photographer. You need to take shots. Like when we need you to take shots, and we're gonna do all kinds of publicity on it. He's like, deal. And so Dean was waiting for me outside, and I'd been in the house, and Shirley said, oh, Bob, you know what? Bill's over there at the National, and some of the girls want to go over. And she's like, points over to the dining room table where there's like this bowl, like a fruit bowl full of the, clubhouse credentials. Okay. The clubhouse at Augusta. And she's like, well, I'm just trying to get stuff ready for dinner tonight. Will you take the girls over to the National? And I'm like, yeah, I will. So I walked outside. She's like, oh, here, gives me the keys. And I looked at Dean and I said, I think we're going to drive down Magnolia Lane in this vehicle that's got a diamond shaped sticker on it that says Masters Champion on it. We're going to drive down Magnolia Lane in this truck. And Dean and I started tearing up. We're like, this is unbelievable. And so that's what happened. Throw everyone in the car. Everyone got your credential. Boom, let's go. And I drove up to that famous gate, looked right at that incredibly intimidating state trooper with the flat brim hat that would scare the death out of anybody, and said, all right, we're ready to go, with all the confidence in the world because I had the clubhouse credential, the whole thing. And boom, I drove like -2 miles an hour down Magnolia Lane, I got to tell you. And then we parked and we walked right in the clubhouse, hung out, had lunch upstairs, the whole thing. So that was a part of the project. But along the way, got to really know Billy extremely well, and I couldn't say that I've ever met like a more of a true gentleman and an incredible humanitarian. He was a lovely man. He would do anything for anybody, even at his own, expense or cost or whatever. And so we even got to the point where at a certain point where we were at the U.S. Open at Olympic, where I talked to the organizers a year in advance, and they said, "All right, we can do some book signings for Mr. Casper. We'll set up a booth in the thing." Well, there was literally a line of like 85 people, like that are in that giant facility that they created, structure that they built for the U.S. Open merch and everything. And it was lined out the front door, down the side, all the way down for Billy. And Billy is like chatting with people, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, you taught me at the Youth Ryder Cup Academy and all these things." And my partners and I at first were like going like, "Billy, you can't spend 5 minutes with everybody. We're selling books here." And then I realized, shut up. I don't care how many books we sell, really, you know? And so I want Billy to enjoy this. And so one of the best things that ever happened to me really in my life is when Billy said, he looks at me and he looked around and he goes, "No, don't tell Shirley this or anybody, but this has been the best period of my life." Here's an 83-year-old man with a heart condition that we know is not going to be around that much longer, who was a great champion, okay, and a great family man to adopt 6 kids and have 5 of your own and a great human. And he said, "This has been the best time of my life because I get all this love from people and I don't have the pressure of playing the actual golf." And I was like, man, what an experience. And so it really got me the keys to the golf universe. And before I became the tournament director. So, but Billy, yeah, I mean, and it's an incredible book. I mean, it's so well written by Lee Benson because it does go through, how he was as great as the other guys. But in early in his career, Billy was first with Mark McCormick, who was the creator of basically the sports agent methodology, was promulgated by Mark McCormick because of what he did with Arnold Palmer. And he was before there were baseball sports agents, before there were professional, and he was the guy. And so there was a person that was working for McCormick that pulled Billy aside and said, "I can make so much more money for you. All the attention is going to Arnold Palmer. And so come with me and we'll make more money and my fee will be a lot less." And so Billy did. So he zigged when he should have zagged. He should have just stayed with Mark McCormick and it would have been the big four. But McCormick, didn't like that. Meanwhile, the guy Billy went with failed. He just fell apart. He didn't do a good job. He wasn't a really good agent, and Billy suffered from it. And that's mainly why Billy didn't get his due. And that's why it wasn't the big four. And then the foreword to the book, which we wrote as a draft, I helped write part of that with Jim and Lee, where the last, and so we wrote it to be something that Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, and Arnold Palmer would sign off on. And they would sign it and say the forward is from them. And so we went back and forth with a couple of iterations. And the last line of it said, when all is said and done, when you really look at it, the big three really should have been a quintet.
Like you've got stories. Like this is incredible, man. Like
I,
what
It
it's
made Billy
awesome.
cry when he saw that. The big three should have been a quintet, and he finally got the due because of this book tour. And so, man, yeah, like, can you see what I'm saying about making, no, I mean, we made money on it, but I didn't. At a certain point, I was like, this is about a great human being and just supporting him and something that I love in golf and the industry and the sector and a great human and an incredible book and we got to go everywhere. And everywhere in the world of golf, we were in the inner sanctums because everyone loved Billy.
Well, you will soon be introducing intelligence reports. Tell me more about those and what you're hoping to provide for businesses and the community leaders here in the Coachella Valley.
This goes back to the Wheeler's market intelligence, and so I'm getting that band back together, and that's the down and dirty data. So let's say I do an art, and so it's going to be a newsletter called the GPS Market Monitor, starting July 1st, our first one, and it's going to be a rotating group of economic categories. For example, we've got a first June edition that's like a sample version. And so it's about the Palm Springs International Airport, the data, what's going on with the airport, what are the trends, how are the Canadians impacting it? But it's data heavy with some points that are made. So it's different than an article, right? And so it goes back to what was Wheeler's Desert Letter. It was Hans Dubach and his Austrian voice saying, just effects, Bob, just effects. Because part of the deal was he had to like help me learn the business as part of the sale. And he was great at following through on what he, pledged to do in our agreement. And so he would be telling me these things. He was just facts. So this is only for a certain group of people that need like real data, like what's the real population? How has it changed? What about assessed valuation? What about retail sales? How about commercial real estate, residential real estate, transient occupancy tax collections? How's the hotel sector doing? But without writing long articles, just sections in a newsletter. And so I'm reprising that, switching from paper to online and creating that. And that's for a wide range of people, both in the region and out of it, that really want to know, what's the data. And so it's like, that's not an everyday person thing, but right. We don't need to own everything to be successful in our lives, right? We need to have a niche on it. And so my sector is, developers, landowners, bankers, public agency people, entrepreneurs that want to really know what things are. As an example, you see like sometimes you see in the media, well, there are 450,000 people here in the desert. I'm like, I see that. I'm like, no, they're not. There's 419,000 people. And some people might say, well, I'm starting a business and I'm trying to get a loan from the bank. And what'd you focus on? What did you do? Oh, I told them how much the population continues to grow. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. We've lost 5,400 people since 2000, right? And so for people that are armed, and then with this information, they're better informed. They can make better business decisions. They can make better decisions for their organizations, for their projects and things that they do, if they're armed with the right data and intel. Like I have a great mentor friend of mine she always says, it's not the most important thing is not the data, it's the intel. What does it mean? And so there are a million things about that's hard to say. But so like I point out things like the city of Indio's transient occupancy tax, which is up to $17 million in the last 2 years, okay, which was $4 million, 12 years ago. But why did that change? And then and so I can show that the short-term vacation rentals units are accounting for 75% of that TOT. So what I see is that's probably a great opportunity for hotels because of the short-term rentals, the Airbnbs are creating that much action, especially around the festivals, the music festivals, the 3 weeks that we have, and all the other events in the East Valley and so forth. Then it's probably an opportunity for hotels. And so this is the difference. It's like intel and data. Now that's a subscription-based publication that's for a small audience. And so that's what I'm doing in that regard. So it's kind of like a sister company, GPS Business Insider. If you were sitting with me, you'd see my hands going like wide apart, saying, this is, and high, boom, boom, making a rectangle saying this is an item for GPS Business Insider. It's the full context. It's some of the data. It's interviews with people that are the experts in the thing. Whereas the Monitor, the newsletter, is like tighter, shorter, more brief, but packed with the data that decision makers need. And so, over the years, I've heard so many stories of people like how they use it. Like let's take a local, like a franchise of a television station that's got an ownership group back in Milwaukee. It's like, that every year, sometimes every half year, every 6 months, they've got to write a report, to corporate and tell them like what's going on, what you can expect, why they're worthy of the investment in the organization and why it's growing or not, but you have to prove it. So for them to have like my information and to be able to copy and paste this information and source it to, GPS market intel, it is gold for them. It makes it so much easier because it's hard to get Coachella Valley only data in a lot of different categories because the census and the bigger entities, the statewide, government agencies that collect and distribute data, they want to do it on the easiest method, the easiest ways, which are county as the smallest entity, right? And then there's the Metropolitan Statistical Area, MSA, of Riverside County and San Bernardino County combined. And so that information is like bang, 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 easy, easy, easy. But when it comes down to like in-market data, it's a lot harder. And so I'm basically outsourcing that information. So I've had people say to me, like, I can get that myself. I'm like, go ahead, go. You can pay me, a few $100 a year for this newsletter. It'll give you everything. Or you could spend, 42 hours of staff time trying to get it in like a hodgepodge of results, and maybe it's not correct. Meanwhile, I'm curating it for you, and I'm presenting it in a way that's understandable, and I'm explaining it. And so that's the value proposition of the GPS Market Intel, the company, which does other things like individual studies for people, like should we build something there? Who's around it? What should we do? And then the newsletter. And so for the people outside of the area, it's critical to have this information because it's like we talked earlier, what's the difference between these different cities? That's like they're night and day when you compare a lot of them to each other, right? And so one time, one of my favorite things that ever happened was I was in my office in La Quinta at the Point Happy Center. I was sitting up there and I had an LED panel on my landline and that would show the source of a call. And one day, I'll never forget it. I was looking at that. The phone rang. I looked at it and it said Bentonville, Arkansas. And I was like, oh my God, Walmart's calling me. And it was. And so they paid me to do an analysis and give them a recommendation of where they should put their first superstore in the region. And they wanted to put it in the eastern Coachella Valley, and they were thinking that Coachella was the right place. But what about, La Quinta or Indio? And so my takeaway, I charged them to do it. I wrote it all up. I gave them tons of supporting information, and I said, I think you should put it in La Quinta because the people in Coachella and Indio will drive to it. They wouldn't be able to help themselves to drive to it, but the people in La Quinta probably won't drive to Coachella to go to the superstore. And so you'll do the Coachella or the Indio one next, but start in La Quinta. And they did it. So that's the kind of stuff. And one time I saw Thomas Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, at a business conference at the J Dub Marriott. And it was the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. And they have like a 3-day conference for these companies to the incredible speakers and, world famous, leaders in business come and talk about different topics and breakout sessions and everything. And so John Mackey was interviewed by, like Deborah Norville or something, like a big time thing in production. And I hunted him down after that presentation and I said, I think I know why you don't have a Whole Foods in the desert. And he looked at me and he goes, you mean here? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, what do you think it is? And just on a fluke, like 2 weeks before that, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a great commercial real estate agency. And the topic of why isn't there a Whole Foods came up? And he said, Bob, he goes, the health food retailers, they will not do anything unless they're confident in one main demographic fact. I'm like, what? He goes, educational attainment. It's something that's in the census, right? And so the government collects this. And so the educational attainment in the Coachella Valley is way below the county as a whole. It's incredibly off compared to Southern California and so many other places. Okay. And I said, educational attainment. He goes, bingo, you're right. And he's walking along. He's not even looking at me at this point. I go, but you're missing it. You don't know what you're missing. He goes, what am I missing? I said, we have about 150,000, what we call snowbirds here. And their educational attainment is off the charts. And so I said, that's a big part of your market. So don't you have different level stores? Like it wouldn't be an A Whole Foods that you would find in like Newport Beach. But don't you have different levels? He's like, yeah, we're working on one, like the B or a C level. And he goes, give me your business card. So boom, all of a sudden someone from Whole Foods called me the next week and I did another study for them. And then bang, there's a Whole Foods in Palm Desert. And so those kind of things I love doing, where like, yeah, you didn't know this. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But that's the reason for a market intel company. And I've had bankers say, like, Bob, I got like this great looking loan application in front of me, but this guy's saying there's like 525,000 permanent residents in the desert. This is years and years ago. And I'm like, no, there's 375,000. And so the guy basically said, well, if that's suspect, they can't even get the population rate. What's right about this business plan? I'm not loaning that company money. This whole thing's a fraud. And so the bankers can rely on it. So I'll leave it at that. But there's a lot of reasons for it. It's very niche oriented, but it's enough to make a living.
Where are you sourcing all of these photos that are on your website? I mean, some of these drone photos are awesome. Do you have photographers on staff, or are you working with contributors throughout the valley?
A combination, yeah, a combination of those things. There's also, I have subscriptions to a lot of different services. Adobe Stock, Shutterstock, and then a lot of it is, comes from the client or comes from the subject of the thing, of the topic. What? Hey, do you have any photos? Oh yeah, we just did a drone thing. We did a whole big video and photos of the piece of land. Would you like that? Yes, send it to me. So it's as simple as that. And sometimes you got to get out and just go take pictures. I love doing it. It's like this one article I did about the Amazon warehouse in Desert Hot Springs, which I'm pretty much dead set against for a variety of reasons, because they tricked the city basically saying it was going to be what's called a point of sale warehouse, where everything that's comes out of that warehouse is, when it's taxed, the taxation percentage that a city would normally get, that it gets at a strip center store or grocery store or whatever, it would get from what the warehouse distributes. But they started with that, which would have been like 20 to 30 million dollars a year for the city. And then, like after this whole long process, they basically said, "Oh, we're we're not doing that. It's just going to be what we call like a cross warehouse or something like that, cross dock warehouse, where basically we get all the truck trips, 1,400 a day when you count in and out, and it doesn't even serve this region. It serves, they basically are getting by the Inland Empire, the Western Riverside County, where they're so stocked with million square foot warehouses that they don't have any room now. So now they're coming in here. And so the stuff comes from the port, drops off at the warehouse, gets repackaged, reset up into another, container onto a truck. And you know what they do? They drive it back west. And then they either go back west and then they go north where there's more growth up there. So we're getting all of the CO2, all of the negative impacts banging up the streets, the whole thing, the traffic from all these truck trips, and almost none of the benefits. And so because of that, I was kind of miffed about it. And so one day, Saturday afternoon, I drove up there to observe it. And so I followed the trucks, and every single truck went west. Like, wait a second, the goods came from west. I thought there was a where. No, it never had any intention of serving any needs of the desert with this warehouse. It was just a solution because they couldn't build it in Western Riverside County. And so, get to the point here is I took photos myself. I got my iPhone, got it tuned up, ready to go. And I took photos of the trucks heading west. You could see, the signs pointing west, and you see the windmills going the opposite direction. And so I used that photo to make a point about what's going on. So that one came from me. So I don't have time to be chasing things around every day, but on a Saturday when it was hot and I wasn't going to go play any golf, I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to go take some pictures of Amazon.
If you could sit down with any business leader, entrepreneur, or just any public official in the Coachella Valley for an exclusive interview, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Well, the ask them part is a little, let's say, who would it be? Easy one. Nachachar Singh Chandi, commonly known as Chandi. And he's East Indian, came from India with like $500 to his name, and worked at a gas station slash convenience store in Coachella, and had so little money that sometimes, but he worked so hard, and sometimes he would be so tired that at the end of the night, this one would like close down. He would sleep on the floor in the back. Like he would stay there, and he fought his way all the way through that to now I think he's a billionaire. He owns like 50 Arco AM PMs. He owns like more than 50 fast food restaurants. He owns commercial real estate. He develops all around. And one of his great things is, he says, when I tell people about myself, I say, I went from India to Indio. And he was always a delightful guy for me. I got to meet him because of some work I was doing for the city of Coachella. And I came up with the idea of like, if we don't have anything to talk about that the city's doing, I was a consultant for them to kind of tell the story of what's going on in Coachella, why it's good things happening here and there. And I said, let's just like prop up, like let's glom on to some of the success stories of the business people in town or businesses. And so Chandi was one of them. So we're like, no, we'll do your grand opening. You don't have to do anything. What? All of a sudden, there's like hundreds of people. It's getting TV coverage. And so Chandi and I developed a great rapport. And he's incredible. And he's become recently the chairman of the 2 years ago, I think, maybe, yeah, I think 2 years ago, became the chairman of the Palm Springs International Film Festival. He gives a lot of back to charity. He does a lot of things, but in terms of like a business person that knows how to work from nothing into the highest levels of success, that's the kind of person I love to talk to because they've got stories. They've got, you know, tragedy and triumph, all of it, and they've got a lot of wisdom and technical expertise too. And so, yeah, I would start with Chandi.
A lot of great golf courses here in the Coachella Valley. What is your favorite and why? Just one. You can't pick two or three. Where's your go-to?
Favorite. Oh gosh, but it's like it's like doesn't mean it has to be a course I play a lot, right?
No,
Like
just your favorite place.
uh, I'd probably say tradition.
That's a good one. A couple of fairways and a couple of greens on a couple of those holes. It's a pretty unique property out there.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. It's right against a mountain. It's lush. It's beautiful. The Arnold Palmer connection. I was lucky enough to get invited to go meet down with the general manager years ago. Just I don't know why. I can't remember exactly what their premise was, but I got to sit in like the Arnold Palmer house, like the little house they have down there. That's separate, and it's got all this like private, memorabilia, and the hand drawn, things of the maps and everything that he, did for tradition. And of course, he had a residence, at tradition. But this was like Arnie's little private retreat, within the club that he could go. Have you heard about that place? Have you been to it?
Yeah, I sure have. They have some meetings in there from time to time too. But yeah, it's a pretty special location, and the history that he has there, and I mean there's some members even wear hats that say Arnie on the front of them. So he's made a big impact at that operation.
Yeah, if I can just do one little story because I think it's important for the golf people that would be listening to this, is that when I was CEO of the tournament, I knew that Mr. Palmer was coming down like towards this later stage in life, and he was not all that well. And still, we had some VIPs that we call them VIPs because they spent like more than twice the amount of money on the pro-am so that they could pick one of the players to play with one of the days, which, had a lot of benefits, put them in the right, grouping where they finished at PJ West on Saturday. And so we had a private dinner for them. And it happened to be like this giant mansion at the Madison Club through a guy who was a big supporter of the tournament that I brought in and got involved. And, he threw this lavish dinner for us there, along with the people at Discovery Land. And so John Foster, the board chairman, asked Mr. Palmer if he would, if he'd like to join us for the dinner because we knew that the VIPs would be crazy thrilled with it. And even, that he wasn't in his best, physical state, he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. And he and his second wife, Kit, came to the dinner, and oh my gosh, I got one of our VIP guys was a great gentleman, Bob Birch III, from New York City, who played in the tournament like 30 straight years and was a big benefactor to us. Besides paying for the highest level pro-am, 83-year-old man, billionaire, and he was sitting there like a kid, just so happy. I put him right next to Mr. Palmer, right? And I've said Arnie and I've said Mr. Palmer here for different reasons on this little story. And so at a certain point in the evening, Kit came up to me and she tapped me on the shoulder and she's like, Bob, would you, our car is here. Would you help Arnie out? And I'm like, of course I will. So there he is. I go get him. He's, I'm like giving these guys the wink, like, let him go because they're still talking with him. And so Kit just wanted to like say goodbye to, I think, John's wife or whatever. And so I literally walk with Mr. Palmer out the to the foyer of this monster house, and and open the door, and these had these big like wide let's call them steps, but they were like 5 7 feet wide, and I just didn't want him to trip. Obviously if I'm going to bring him out and help him to the car, of course I'm watching out for him. So I put my arm under his, and been bringing him down, not doing a lot, but like just going along, guiding with him just to make sure he wouldn't trip. And as we were walking, we stopped at one of them because it was a decent way at an estate like that to where the car was. And I said, Mr. Palmer, I just got to say to you, I just want to tell you how grateful I am. And I know you've heard this before, but I just want to tell you that how important it is to me, like what you did for golf, what you've done. And and I was like looking at the side of his face, and he looked over at me and he goes, no, Bob, what it did for me, what golf did for me. And then he paused and he said, it gave me everything. And then we walked and put him in the car. And I was like, and he goes, and then he said, and by the way, and as we got close to the car, he said, don't ever call me Mr. Palmer again. I'm Arnie to you, Bob.
Pretty cool. That's a pretty cool story.
That was
I
cool.
Yeah, it's Arnie. Well, how cool is that, man? Well,
Yeah.
hey, we have covered so much stuff today. I've really enjoyed listening to you and your stories, and you're a change maker here in the Coachella Valley. But is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like our listeners to know?
Well, I think I'll just say it that I think that I want to be a force for good for the golf industry in the greater Palm Springs, Coachella Valley area. Instead of just talking about it or whatever, I'm going to start covering in like a special type of, recurring column, if you will. It's not going to be every month or all the time, but I'm going to do the business of golf in the Greater Palm Springs. And so I look forward to, collaborating on that with people like you and your colleagues at the GM level, the club managers, the Derek Whites of, on the high level public sector, to be a force for good, because I did come up with a similar way to do it years ago with the tournament. I created the, Coachella Valley Golf Summit because those were like really some of the worst water years, right? And the industry was getting beaten up. So we had, I'm sure Craig Kessler from SCGA. I had like some of the pros come in, and we had just different topics like environmental issues, water issues, growth of the game, all these things. And so we did it the week of the tournament at the, the Palm, at the private clubhouse at PJ West. And so I've always like wanted to do things like that. So now I have a platform and I have a way to do it. And so I feel like you guys know all the data, you understand it. And so if we look at like last month, there was the National Golf Day, right? Where the people like you and the others throughout different sectors of the industry went to Washington, D.C. to talk to members of Congress that they'd set meetings up with to basically say, here's what's good about golf. Here's the economic impact. Here's how we give our courses for charity. They can make money. We donate it. We do this, we do that. We're big time employers. We're stewards of the environment because we actually help filter water rather than use up as much as we used to. And so all these things. And so I want to have a local version of that here to support our local golf industry because it's critical. We deserve it. The community needs to understand the importance of golf from all of the aspects. The young people, women getting involved in golf and propping up the manufacturers and the apparel companies. And so that's the last thing. I'll leave you with that I want to be a great partner to the sector, and I'm not selling you anything. I'm just trying to, I think it's critical. If I've got a business publication and it doesn't include golf industry, then I'm kind of stupid. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to incorporate it. So I look forward to working with the industry to be a force for good in terms of letting people know what's going on and how important you are to this region in particular.
Where's the best place to learn more about you and GPS Business Insider? Where should we go?
Just right to the .com, gpsbusinessinsider.com.
Let's tee it up soon. I didn't ask. Are you a member anywhere? And then I was going to
Not now.
say, I
No,
mean, your
I'm
your
not.
house or mine. I mean, we got a lot of places to choose from. Where do you want to go?
Jeez. Gosh, there's so many good choices. I just play at Desert Willow now. I don't play as much at all. My son's a great golfer, and he played on the COD team, and he just finished his second year, and so he's been playing a lot, but I haven't been playing as much. So I got to get back in the groove. I've been super busy and just like total, blackout on playing. So I want to get back in good stead. But there's so many great places to play. There's so many good ones, and I suspect you've got access to all of them, huh?
Well, we at the Springs got a founding membership over at the Back Nine in Rancho Mirage. Have you been over there yet? We can go check that out.
The what?
The Back Nine Golf. It's an indoor simulator. It's awesome if you haven't seen it. There's a couple of them popping up here in the Coachella Valley, but it's literally right across the street from Yard House and next to Hobby Lobby.
Goodness sakes. See, that's the thing. These people should, I want them to be able to find me and let me know. But yeah, that would be a good place. I'd like to come join you out at the Springs one day. That's one of the courses I've never played.
Oh, no kidding. Well, we completely redid it last summer. Redid the irrigation, new grass type on the greens, and they're I mean they're in spectacular shape right now. The greens are some of the best in the Coachella Valley, and it's a fun layout. You hit it left to right, right to left, and not a lot of undulation, but we got a lot of sets of tees to choose from, and it'd be my pleasure to have you come out as my guest.
Okay, let's make a point. I know you're a busy guy, I can tell. And so let's make a point to do it one way or the other sometime soon. And then what would you recommend about this, golf industry thing? Is go come to one of your meetings to introduce myself and like do that presentation that we talked about, and then just try to like tell this to your colleagues to say, how can we attack this? The economic impact, the charitable impact, the payroll, whatever stats, the number of rounds. Like you guys, I mean, there are sources for that do the rounds, I suspect. Like there's CoStar for the hotel sector, but I need to, I want to not do it in a vacuum. I want to do it with the experts like you and your colleagues, to create the framework. So what do you think is the best route to do that?
Yeah, I think it's just conversations like this that can lead to conversations that we have either on or off the golf course about just making sure you're connected to the right people, and it's not as much the clubs as it is the CMAA and the Golden State chapter of CMAA, and you might even be able to get some data from the PGA of America and the Southern California section. There's lots of different places that you could go.
Okay, yeah. I think the other part of it is like what are the most important data points, And so I think yeah, we'll table it for another time. I think I put together a framework, just like a Word document, And so I've got to like review that again. And maybe I could just send it to you and you could say, dude, that's a stupid, I don't go for that category, or you'd have to buy that from a company, or what about this? You missed that one, but these five categories are good. And maybe that could be something. If I just sent you like a two-sheeter on what I'm thinking, you could tell me good idea, bad idea, good idea, bad idea.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at it.
Okay, let's do it. And then I'll have a thing. Like I used to go do presentations. People would ask me, like, as the CEO of the tournament, you want to come do a presentation? And I would, part of the presentation was like just look at the desert from an aerial, like topography standpoint. And my proposition, my statement on this is that the golf not only is an integral part of the economy, but it was a big factor in how the urban planning of the desert happened. The way it's laid out, the way the urban planning and so forth was in large part, in response to the golf sector, the country clubs, the real estate, the courses and everything. Because if you look at Palm Springs and Cathedral City, there aren't really that many golf courses. And those cities have been around for, going on 75, 80 years, and there's only a couple few golf courses there. So what happened to change that? Oh, the Bob Hope Chrysler Classic was on one of three national channels for 50 straight years. And so it was like the Pasadena Rose Bowl effect, where people, realized, I guess we could move, couldn't we? If we hate snow, I guess we could go to California. And they came. And so I think that has been a big factor in the literally the physical construct that is the Coachella Valley beyond just the economic impact. So, I think that there's justification to keep covering it, and to do it with some intensity so that you guys can use it when there does come a controversy, because the water stuff's going to come back, right? The water, we're getting worse again. We had like some really great years after some dire things, and that's when guys like Craig Kessler and the crew had some splaining to do, and it was easy to beat up golf courses, and then we had tons of water, and now we don't again.
Leaders are readers. What book are you currently reading?
Oh, geez, you know what? I got to say, I don't really read, and I don't really read like novels or things like that because I'm reading all day, every day. So I feel I don't think that's a good thing. But I'm reading, and I read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, LA Times, and things like that, newsletters, articles, professional journals, all day, every day. So like I'm exhausted, at when might be reading time at night. So I've kind of gotten lazy on that part. I don't know. I know I'm missing, but that's what I'm just concentrating and focused all day.
Who is in your dream foursome? And that's anyone, alive or dead. And where are you playing? That's anywhere in the world.
Jeez, I guess it would be like, all right, the foursome. I would say I would pick Billy Casper in his prime, even though it's not possible. Tiger, of course, because they're stupid not to. Um, Michael Jordan, because he loves golf so much, and my son. And I would play at Michael Jordan's course.
All right, that's pretty good. You got Tiger in the group, so I'm on. Can I caddy for you if Tiger's in the group?
Yeah, I'll let you know. I got to meet him a couple times because of Billy, and so I had some cool things happen there. And so it's a big difference between like, seeing him on the golf course trying to talk with him versus, which is impossible and it always was, and just being like in the Ryder Cup room. And like one time, Billy I got a whole bunch of interviews, at the 2012 US Open at Olympic Club where Billy had won in 66. And so the book was like just starting to pop and everything. So I was lining up all kinds of, golf media interviews with Billy, and they were all going for it. Everybody, Golf Digest, the biggest ones, all the way down to like Matt Adams with his Fairways of Life and on and on. I'm still in touch with Matt every once in a while, and and these kind of people and everything. And then I looked down at one point, during one of Billy's interviews in the media tent and the adjacent areas where they were doing, the early week player interviews, like what's your outlook, how you feeling, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Tiger's coming. Tiger's like up in like a half an hour. And so I literally dreamt something up. I was like, Billy, because of the Ryder Cup, I'm like, they love Billy. Like Freddie Couples used to always call Billy, call him BC. And so then Tiger started calling him BC. And I'm like, Billy, Tiger's doing an interview. And I went over there before I talked to Billy and I saw exactly where the players were going to come in. When you run a golf tournament, you kind of, ingress and egress of these things. And I'm like, he's going to come in right over there. I go, don't you've always talked about how much you and Tiger, how you talked to him and you consoled him and you kind of helped him through, the time in 2009. He's like, yeah, he goes, I love Tiger. And we have a very close relationship. That's the way Billy would talk a lot of times. And I said, well, why don't you go say hi to him? He's like, well, what are you talking about? And I go, he's coming, he's going to come right over through there. He's going to walk up there and he's going to do his interview for, this US Open Tuesday interview. He's like, oh, he goes, that would be a great idea. So boom, we went over there and stood, and no one else cared. Like they're not standing like in the next to the ropes, waiting for Tiger. Boom, Tiger came by and he's like walking. He's got his head down a lot. He looks up, and then he saw Billy, and then he put his head down and he started walking. He goes, whoa, and he stopped in his tracks and he walked right over to Billy with a giant smile, and he reached his arms out and hugged Billy because Billy was famous for being a hugger, right? And you could see that relationship that they had bonded in the champions locker room, over the years at the Masters and other things. And they had this big long hug. And it was still, the time was like still not that long after, 2009 situation. And it was such a great thing that even what's it, Ron Kroichek, I think is his name, something like that, the golf writer, sports writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, wrote about it. He said, I've seen something that I've never seen. Tiger Woods hug somebody. And who was it? The great Billy Casper. So I had so many little fun things like that, they were really fun, those kind of things. And then I just got to hang out with Tiger for a little while. They were waiting for the shuttle to come pick him up to take him to the closing ceremony. And I just got to chat with him, and Freddie was there, and I knew Freddie, pretty well because of the Desert Connection. So we just got to, hang out and just chat with Tiger and Freddie. And so I thought that was kind of fun. He's an interesting dude.
Well, speaking of Tiger, he's tied with Sam Snead, 82 official PGA Tour wins. He's back from rehab. He had a smile on his face when he landed. Do you think he gets one more before he retires?
Boy, it doesn't seem like it, does it? I mean, I have such a sad feeling when like the one time that when he came back before this from Switzerland, not this most recent one, the last couple of days, but like a month ago, and you could just see how like damaged his right leg is. And I just feel like it doesn't seem like feasible for him to win a PGA Tour event. I guess it doesn't seem like it, but I hope, look, I hope comes back, to a place that he's like happy with his life and free from the pain that, management stuff and doesn't have to take the pills. But I mean, he's had all those health problems, and, I don't blame him for what happened recently. Just like I'm just rooting for him, man, just rooting for him. And because he became like the kinder, gentler, nicer Tiger, didn't he? Like later in his career, and like the guy who's helping with the Ryder Cup teams and President's Cup, and he's working on the player advisory committee, and he became like a kinder, gentler Tiger, and he was always funny with great sense of humor and everything. But I rooted even more for him then. So I hope so. I doesn't seem feasible though.
What's next for you and GPS Business Insider?
We're just going great guns, more coverage, more things, more topics, more, people helping me, and just continue to expand it, like, picking off different categories like the golf category, like I said, and expanding it to the people that want to know about it, and just being, the best I can be to the people living here who are, living and working in the region, trying to, you know do great business, prop up the economy and everything. So there's that. But then, but the GPS Business Insider is pretty, up and running and has its own flow and cadence and everything. But it's the market intel is the next big deal, is to bring the data and intel back to people.
Step into the heart of Scotland with Eden Mill Scotland Experiences. Journey through the art of craft distilling, where tradition meets innovation. From blending your own gin to savoring the finest whiskies, every moment is a celebration of Scotland's rich heritage. Whether you're a whiskey enthusiast, a gin lover, or simply an adventurer at heart, Eden Mill offers experiences you'll never forget. Book your journey today and create memories to last a lifetime.
In golf, the 19th hole is a slang term for a bar or a restaurant on or near the golf course, very often in the clubhouse itself. A lot of good ones here, a lot of good ones around the country. What is your favorite and what are you drinking?
I gotta say, like, if it's not on the course or whatever, the clubhouse or whatever, I love going to the Tommy Bahamas in Palm Desert, on El Paseo, because no matter when you go in there, there's a good buzz going, there's people and everything. I love that bar in the middle. It just feels like a vacation. I feel like I'm on vacation, I'm hanging out, there's a buzz going, it's active. Even like, look, we could go on like a Tuesday afternoon in July and it's busy in there. So I like that aspect of it. I feel like I'm on vacation, and I just have to go with my good old ice cold IPA beer. That's what I would like to do. Finish up the 18th, pack it in, drive to Tommy Bahamas, set up shop at the bar, have some ice cold IPAs.
Man, I knew we were going to get along, but then you said that. I'm a big beer guy, and IPA is my jam. So I love that location, especially when it's cool and you can sit out and look at the views, and it's always tourists that are in there. So I think that's a good idea. Let's play some golf and let's go have an IPA at Tommy Bahamas, man. But
Done deal. Done
well,
deal.
thank you so much for doing this. I mean, I really, really enjoy getting to know you, and I'm pumped to have you speaking at a Roadrunner Region land meeting this fall. And I'm just so excited that we got the chance to do this. I hope we get the chance to tee it up soon, and keep up the great work. And I can't wait to see where you go and where you grow from here.
Thanks, Ricky. I couldn't say enough about how much I enjoyed this, and it's been great getting to know you. And let's keep it going. I want to develop our relationship and have some fun.
That puts this instalment of the Wednesday Match Play podcast in the books. But we'll be back next week for another exciting episode of the show.